Okay, so this time we've got designing your creative career, work models, skills, and sustainable futures. So next slide, please, Yelena. Okay, so again, a lot of this, we've touched on aspects of this in the previous, today and yesterday. And so I think this is about how the fact that you can actually design, in a way, design your own career. I mean, sometimes there'll be serendipity. Some things will come along that you didn't expect. But at this point in time, when you're emerging creative, you can actually start to think about how you actually design your own career, rather than feeling that you have to go down one really set path.
Yeah, just to add, I'll give you an example of that. We know her. She's actually a judge for the Global Grad Show now, but she graduated in fine art years ago and ended up working in a gallery where she wanted to show her work, but she wasn't. I don't think she actually ever got her work in that gallery. Actually, funny enough, but she ended up being one of their curators. Did all the social media and continued doing her own art, which then appeared in other galleries. So, but she was flexible enough to realize that, well, wait a minute, if I can't get into this gallery with my art, it would be good to get an understanding of how a gallery works, and becoming their head of social media, being one of the curators of that gallery, it led to bigger things. So yeah, you've got to be flexible, and be open-minded to, as long as it's relevant. If it's long, if you go too far away from where you actually started, then one could argue, well, why did you do it in the first place? So there has to be a balance on that. Next
Okay.
slide.
Okay. Next slide. So these are different options for recent graduates or emerging creatives. Internships, learn from others, credibility, which we've touched on today. Freelance work, which gives you independence, or employment. So that's sort of stability and structured growth. So again, this is something which it's very hard to predict, because you don't know where one might lead to another. You could be working freelance for someone and then they end up offering you a full-time job. Again, internships, start an internship, end up working freelance or full-time job. So again, these are all quite flexible, and you shouldn't really feel that they're sort of one is going to necessarily be so structured. So it can move between these different elements.
I would say the employment is more structured.
Mm-hmm.
You're married to that company, but to get your foot, the internship, the freelance, that could lead to employment. That's you, but we've got freelancers that have been working with ArtShred for the last 17 years and never worked full time ever, and that suits them because it means they can work on other projects and work with different clients. So, again, it's building that reputation and getting your name out, really. Next
Slide. Stop small, thinking big. So this is talking about how how a small project can have a big impact, and how if you start with product prototypes, such as you design one chair, you can actually then start with maybe a mini pop-up exhibition. People come to see it and say, oh, this will be great, let me show this in Milan, for example. And then you might find a manufacturer who then wants to take your work on. So and launch it actually into a bigger furniture range. So it's thinking about how these small projects can have a big impact in the future.
I'm going to give an example. We had two designers who came across each other on ArtSthread as students. One was in Scandinavia, the other one, I think she was in Stockholm. The other one was here in the UK. And I don't know who approached who first, but felt that what they were creating, one was the chair, one was the textile. They thought, well, bringing the textile from Scandinavia with the furniture from the UK in a complementary way, but a really interesting story. They then launched that the furniture fair in Milan and never looked back. So that's these things can happen by being proactive, right? Again, there may be where you are today in Serbia or anywhere in the Balkans. You could be looking local, but selling it to the world or taking it to the world by being outwardly thinking, because the world has got smaller because of digital. That's the beauty. Yeah. So yeah, thinking big is exactly that. Next slide, please.
First Independence Initiative. So these are, again, leading on from the last slide, is about how you can actually create something for yourself on a small scale. So whether that's launching micro collection, community design showcase, or social media project. So it's how you, instead of feeling, oh, I really need to start by, I don't know, having a stand at Milan Furniture Fair, for example, it's how you can actually start small and actually build from there to get to where you want to go. And sometimes where you might want to go, your original thought might change. Something will come along that you never thought about and thought, yeah, that's great. Or someone will approach you.
I think what springs to mind with this is that you could conceivably realize, think, well, look, this is awfully tough, me just doing this by myself. Why don't I align with like-minded people who are offering different, so furniture, interior, architect, graphics, creating your own um, hub of creatives and splitting costs, projecting yourselves together through social media, through Shopify, whatever it may be, but you're carving it up, making it more affordable because there's 6 of you rather than one, so less of an overhead. So but it's collaboration. It's building your own network. You've got to build your own network. It's really important, because building a network means that other people will help you while you're sleeping, and that's very relatable from where we come from, because when we sleep, things happen. So build a network and project that, and thinking big, but working together as a community from one area. It's a great story. Okay.
Yeah, people love stories.
Next.
Next slide. So this is like being creative more than just craft. So this is, as we've talked on, these are some skills that you'll need beyond the obvious ones of what area of creativity you're working in. So whether that's AI tools, which we spoke about yesterday, photography and presentation skills, marketing literary or languages. So it's how you actually learn these skills, or as Alex touched on earlier, how you actually get like colleagues or people you work with, or you can actually outsource those to other people to do for you if that's not a skill that you possess yourself.
This is exactly the example of the textile designer in
Mm.
Stockholm tying up with a furniture designer in the UK and then showcasing in Milan. I mean, I'm not saying everyone does that, because that's quite unusual, but it's a good example of collaborating with other people who have got different skills but having a common goal. And you're far more powerful as a team than you are by yourself. Yeah.
So then we've got industry shifts and upskilling. So this is how it's really important to follow industry shifts. I mean, at where you are as emerging creatives, you are actually you know what is happening now, and it actually, what's really important is to feel that in the future you will need to keep learning in the past, people will be able to learn something, even creatives, and not feel that they had to learn a huge amount of skills, or not, at least not very often. But now I think in the world we live in, it's like constantly feeling that you have to learn new skills and be watch out for these new skills and these new trends. I mean, this can work for your to your advantage, because as an emerging creative, you are more you will know these skills. You're more likely to be jumping on and wanting to do them, because what happens often you find in industry is after so many years, people go, oh, I don't want to learn that skill. Let me get this young person can come in and they know all these skills. So I think the more that you know these tools, these new emerging tools, in a way, the easier it is to get work.
I'll give you an example. Hugo Boss did exactly that. They hired some recent graduates, some not necessarily graduates even. All they were looking for were people with skills in a particular type, which is clo. Now, okay, I know not everyone in here is fashion, but it's irrelevant. What I'm giving an example of is that there was a tool that no one in that brand was using. Suddenly thought, well, wait a minute, why don't we hire or bring some internships or freelancers who've got the skill, and then suddenly people within the organization learn from them. Okay, but that can lead to employment, lead to freelance work. But that you've got to stay ahead. You've got to evolve. You've got to be on the any new technology that's coming in within the area of your expertise. If you don't move with the times, you'll be left behind. And that's the truth. That's just the way it is. So you've got to move with the times. Next slide, please.
So again, we've touched on this. This is where we were talking about freelance, and we're talking about part-time studio or collectives. And I think what's interesting is now we're sort of living in a world where people could be working almost
Anywhere.
part-time, but on a fixed contract, then freelance, then moving on maybe it's a 6-month contract or a 3-month contract. So it's this ability to be flexible is really important.
Yeah, being flexible, but being anywhere. It doesn't matter where your location is. I mean, I've got friends living in Bali now who are working with companies in Italy. They're delivering. As long as they deliver, that's key. Personally, I think, I'm not old school in this, but I do think it's important to eyeball people and sit with people and meet people face to face, but not necessarily Monday to Friday. So I think people are a lot more flexible than they ever were pre-pandemic. Though I would say the majority of the companies in the creative industry were wanting people sitting in an office 9 to 5, right? Since the pandemic, there's a lot of people that go, well, wait a minute, we don't have to have this massive office. We don't have to have this big overhead. We can have, we've got employees who have been delivering historically for years, who've got families, who might want to move to other parts of the planet. And as long as they deliver, that's all that matters. But the problem for a junior designer, an artist, is that you've got to build that understanding of, and sometimes it's a lot easier sitting there with that person and learning and gaining that mentorship, because it's actually quite difficult to do that online when you might only get 2 hours a week. So I'm a big advocate of people being in office in the early stages to learn on the job. But then I'm talking about employment there. On the other side of the coin, going back to the collectives and freelancing, it doesn't work like that. You're working to a brief and you're delivering, but we've already covered that previously. So next slide.
Okay, so this again, this is talking about co-working spaces, maker labs, and actually this is very, very, very useful, because you learn so much from just being with your peers, with other people that are in these co-working spaces. You can work on collaborations together. You can ask them there's so much interaction that you get from these spaces. So I think that's possible.
Just to touch on this, so that this picture is an example of a co-working space that I've been to a couple of times, and you've got different guys here, different ladies, different men, um, that have all got their own business. One of them's got graphics, another one's an architect, another one actually has got a brewery. There's a big space in southeast London where it was an old derelict building, and as a collective, one of the guys decided that he had one little space in that building on the ground floor, and then realized he put the word out with friends and colleagues and his old university friends and lecturers to put the word, say, look, I've got this space. It's peppercorn rent. When I say peppercorn rent, low rent, because the building it was going to dilapidate. It was going to end up being probably knocked down if it wasn't going to be used much longer. And lo and behold, there's now 25 different startup companies in that business, in that building. So it's a good example. And you're far better being a co-working space with others because you're accessible. You know, if you're on the same floor as a graphic designer sitting on the same floor as an interior designer, and you get on and you like each other, it's very likely you'll probably end up working with each other on a project. So they're great. I mean, there's not enough of them, is the truth of the matter, but it seems to be getting bigger and bigger globally, and we're big advocates for that. Next stage.
Like, so this is about creating your own opportunities. So whether that's local craft markets, student-run galleries, online stores, small regions. So it's thinking about what's there on your doorstep that you can actually get involved in, or actually as a collective, you could actually create your own exhibitions or opportunities, and thinking about online stores as well. So now, now there is the opportunity to do these online stores, which there wasn't in the past. So I think there's lots of ways in which you can get your voice heard.
To add to this, just to go back, sorry, Yolana, the online store, I think it's a lot more powerful, of multiple brands being on that one store than one brand.
Yeah.
Unless you're a big brand, that's different. But if you're not a big brand, my gut, I think, wouldn't it be really cool if you've got a Serbian, um, one particular region within Serbia, for example, it could be around the Belgrade area, it could be in Novi Pazar, it could be whatever it may be, but there's a collective of individuals on an online store that are offering, not replicating what each other, not doing the same thing. It might be, footwear, accessories, graphics. It could be anything, but far more powerful, more than one. If you're not big, you're not established. You need to help each other, and we keep on homing in on it, but you're only as strong as your community. So if you can project your community and you're all doing your bit from a social media perspective and putting the word out, far better have 10 people than one, is what I'm saying. Next stage, sorry.
Next slide. So again, focusing on this local identity idea is that, again, and I'm sure, we talked about this before, about using local materials or using local cultural heritage, but blending it with modern design, and sort of and again, this going back to the idea of perhaps then having this website with a collection of different local designers all doing different types of products. This tells a really nice story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example. Fashion collection inspired by Bolton textiles, right? So, I'm working on this thing in Africa at the minute, which is kind of mad, but it's called African Artisan. It's been very slow going. I'll be honest with you. It's taking a lot longer than I envisaged, but at the end of the day, it's a great story to have Kenyan designers, Uganda designers, Zimbabwe designers, different handwritings, different tribes, different textile, different imagery, different ceramics, different pot. That is not instantly accessible in your local store. So why not the Balkans? Why not, Balkan, you've got a handwriting that you might not necessarily see. People here in the UK might never have seen certain textiles coming from Novi Pasa, for example, right? Isn't it a brilliant thing to project that? To keep that heritage, to show your skills, show your handwriting that no one. I mean, that's a far more powerful story showing something that people have never seen before, rather than God, I've seen it all before. You know what I mean? It's that,
Yeah.
and being proud, right? Being proud of where you're from, your heritage, and yeah, bringing the 21st century by all means, but using these skills that need to be used, because if they're not used, they die. Okay, very powerful, great story. Not a lot of people do it, and should do, because it can kill a region. That's the truth of the matter. The DNA is important, and people buy into that emotional attachment, right? So there's stories massive. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basically my take on it. But next step, please.
Oh, and this is about protecting your work. So here we're looking at patents. That's really for inventions, copyright, creative work, trade secrets. I think we touched on this quite a lot yesterday, didn't we, with Nick?
Yeah, we
So
did an element of Jed as well, with the way things are going on with AI. I think the thing that, I mean, they used to, and I'll give you a good example. When I was doing textiles way back, when I first started, I used to create the design, and then I would post it. I actually would take a copy of the design and put it in a letterbox, have a stamp on it, and send it back to myself. Now, that was my evidence, because with a stamp, you'd have a date on it. So what we're working on behind the scenes at ArtShred, which is taking a lot longer than we ever envisaged, but I mean, ever envisaged, nothing goes fast, right? Not when you're doing something quite complicated. But the idea is of trying to protect the creatives. So, we're working on this thing called the ArtShred Vault, where creations, your original concepts, your ideas, you can log them. You can get a digital certificate, like the stamp that I was talking about. That evidence that you did that on that day at that time, that's better than nothing. Okay, but it's not trademarking, it's not copywriting. If someone pinches that concept of yours because your work's out there, there's thieves everywhere, right? Let's just face fact. No matter where you are on the planet, there's people always going to pinch something, right? But it's like, how do you go about that by protecting? Was it Jed or Nick yesterday who was saying about the fact that maybe, I think it was Jed, where you're talking about you've got to put your work out there, right? Because people need to know that
yeah,
you
yeah,
exist.
yeah,
So I can't turn around and say, oh, please don't. You've got to. It's the reason why we created ArtShred. It's the reason why we do the Global Grad Show, because, there's people out there that want to buy, want to hire, want to invest in individuals. And if they're not psychic, and I haven't met one yet, you've got to get out there. You've got to put yourself out there. But there's a risk attached to that. But sometimes you've got to gamble to get the break. But if you think about it logically, and how you register it and build that evidence, and thanks to someone like ourselves who're trying to build something that's going to hopefully launch within the next few months, you know, it will come about where we will be able to help. We'll be able to help you. I mean, that's the truth.
yeah,
But in the meantime, think about the bigger picture. Log everything that you've done, but don't forget, 9 times out of 10, it's probably been done before, right? I mean, so I've met people that think they've reinvented the wheel, and the wheel's been done many centuries ago. So, we just got to be clear, that, you know, we might think we've invented something and 27,000 versions have been done of it previously. So, we've got to be realistic with ourselves as well, but patenting, if you've got something is truly original, really original, you've done your research and no one's ever done it before, then don't put it out there. Is the truth of the matter. You've got to, get people to sign NDAs, then they can look at what you've created. But really, normally that happens when you're more established, genuinely. That's how it
okay. Next slide, please, Yelena. So this is talking about, again, when we go back to the example of the furniture and the chair. So knowing the difference between like small batch productions versus mass production, cost versus quality. So it's like learning how to collaborate with manufacturers. Again, I think this is something that you would learn over time. You could locally produce prototypes, but then in the future you can scale that internationally through a brand.
Yeah, I'm gonna just dead quick. Locally might think, well, I get it done in China. Don't do that. Stay local, keep local. You're more in control. You don't know where it's going if you do go down that path of another part of China, because it can go out the back door of the factory. So there's things that you need to know. But yeah, I think you've got an advantage. I mean, I was talking to Maya the other day about denim, for example, in Novi Pasa, where I've already checked the prices coming out of Serbia are definitely more economical than Turkey and Italy. So there could be an opportunity there, right? So you've got some manufacturing on your own doorstep. Try and stay local. You're more in control. You build a bigger rapport, and you can build something probably even more powerful. Made in Serbia, right? I think you should be, that these things are. I love that, right? When I go somewhere, I always try and buy something locally. If you could bring it to me, and I think, oh my God, that's amazing. I'd far rather buy something made in Serbia than made in China. And I'm going in for the Chinese. I really mean this, because we've got Chinese students, but I'm sick of seeing made in China. I'd rather see made in Serbia. So just, it's not a negative, it's a massive positive, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is we have touched on this. This is how if you're collaborating with a manufacturer, then the initial vision may need to be diluted, but you need to balance commercial needs versus creative integrity. Like, for example, if we go back to the furniture, they may say, well, this part of the back of the chair that you want, or it's very costly for us to do. Are you happy for us to, if we do it all in one piece, or we do it in a different way? So again, it's measuring up these two, to balancing these two factors.
Yeah, because I think, again, I can give you an example. We created an accessory in Italy that was all whistles and bells. There was a lot to it, but when we showcased it, we said, look, we could adapt this, but this is what the capability is. We could do the polar opposite of that. Maybe you have amazing renderings and sketches of something, but no, this is our compromise, because this is where we're making it, but we can go the extra mile. But at the end of the day, better to have a prototype than nothing at all. But sometimes you have got to compromise, because there may not be that skill, that capability. But if you can project it and give it and make it really easy for the viewer to understand, oh, right, okay, well, if I pay that, can I have that? Then you can source it, right? But
I mean, and actually, Alex, I think also, I know in lots of parts of Europe and in the US, there's been a lot of designers, fashion designers, but also furniture designers that have worked with big brand names like, I don't know, IKEA or whoever, and to do versions of their either completely new products or versions of something, usually versions of something that's been successful for this designer.
Yeah,
And again, you know, even they have to have compromised to an extent on materials, make.
Yeah, more simplified version because of
Yeah.
cost effectiveness of it, manufacturing. Because yeah, manufacturing it's costly. Yeah. Next,
So next up, we've got international exposure, competitions, exhibitions, collaboration. So when we've got an example of fashion designer from Serbia wins international competition and gets press and clients globally. So again, this is about how important it is to enter the right competitions, to be involved in the right exhibitions and collaborations, because all these things can lead to lots of opportunities which you probably never thought about before.
well, this is what we're doing now.
Mm.
This is what you know. We're flying over, collaborating within an exhibition. It's a form of competition. We're going to be showcasing, you know, your creations. Hopefully, listening to what we're advising you to do to make it easier for us to project you to the world. And that's exactly what it is. You know, proof's in the pudding. So, you know, you've got the opportunity. The fact that you're on this call today or watching in person, you know, we will project you to the world, right? Just listen to what we're advising you to do, because we'll project you even better if you're doing what we're asking, right? So that's basically where we're coming from with this slide. Next step, please.
So again, going back to what we've been talking about, the roots can be your advantage, unique visual language, storytelling, differentiation. This is so important. I mean, what's quite interesting is that we've seen in the universities a big shift from how designers look at their original inspiration. I mean, you could probably 20 years ago, you would get graduation projects where I said, "Oh, I went on holiday last year to Barbados, and and here is a project based on my holiday." And it's really interesting that in the last 10 years, we've seen that how the graduates, which I think is a good thing, they've been really encouraged to look at their roots. So local. So what they're talking about in the projects that they inspire, it has inspired them for these projects. It is about their local roots, what inspires them, their background, something that's happened to them in their life, rather than
So
something that's just added
no,
on.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm going to give an example. South Africa. Um, South Africa last year, we had designers who were conforming to the West. And don't get me wrong, South Africa is quite Western, really, but they have different tribes. They have different color sense. They've got skills that not necessarily you can get in the UK or Italy, for example. Isn't it more powerful to project um, and bringing that to other parts of the planet? You know what you are, what you truly are. You know that heritage, telling that story, than rather than conforming. Okay, something really important to say. There is nothing more painful than seeing, and I saw this, and I'm going to give an example in Africa last year. That some of these designers were conforming to Western culture. They were almost aspiring to be working for Prada, for example, right? And it's like you are so far away from what they're looking for. What they'd be far more interested in is if you thought about the brand Prada, but putting an African twist on that. So those amazing tribal prints, and but aligning with the product that they create, so it's not completely look like it's handcrafted from a local market. It's still high end luxury, but it's bringing in that tribal, that African, that those amazing. And look, we've seen it all before. You know, LVMH and all these massive brands, they have these different looks and feels of different cultures, but they often try and they pinch it. Why don't you stay true and bring what you do to them, and not try to conform to them? Far more excited to be true to yourself than try to be someone that you're not. Because
Mm.
that's like everybody else. It's like being part of the flock. You might as well be a sheep. So yeah, next stage.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh yeah, final thoughts. Yeah, so you're designing your own ecosystem, not just choosing a job. So this is where we've been talking about how you can design your own career, but think strategically. But it's also about maybe not being scared if things don't go the way that you have planned them, because I mean that's the whole thing with life. You just don't know where it's going to take you and what opportunities come your way.
There's a lot to this slide, is the truth of the matter,
Mm.
right? Um, and there's a lot being asked here, right? But you do need to think ahead. You do need to know, how you go about building this, and you haven't got the all-seeing eye, right? I hate to say it, but you haven't. No one has, right? Um, but what you can do is take on board and learn and develop and evolve. But that takes time, right? But being open-minded and building those skills and realizing that, right, this is what I need to do to get where, because there's a goal and you've got to put the ball in the back of the net, right? You're starting here. How do you get the other side of the picture? But that's the analogy. It's stage by stage. But as long as you know where you're heading, right? That if you don't know where you're heading, you're going to struggle, and that's just the truth. You need that, right? That is my goal. Your goals may change, but there has to be a goal. You should set yourself a goal today. All right, that is my aim. That is what I'm. And you know what? If you only get halfway there, it's better than nothing at all and standing still. Right? Don't stand still. Stand still. It's the end. Right? You don't get anywhere. So there's a lot to it, but open. You've got all these opportunities that are around, and creative thinkers have that advantage over people that are not creative thinkers. That's the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.